Because of my autism and DID, I have certain symptoms that make people think I'm on drugs, or I experience things that make people think that I'm beneath them. And I'm also a highly spiritual person, and because my disabilities definitely affect my experiences on a spiritual level, as my disabilities very heavily affect my consciousness itself, and I would say even affect me on a spiritual level. I believe my autism and my DID do affect me on a spiritual level. And sorry, I'm a bit sick right now, so if it sounds like I'm struggling to talk, that's why. I'm still a bit sick. I got water poisoning, mold poisoning from drinking bad water a few days ago. I'm still recovering. But one thing that hurts is that I've noticed people who actually, I'm not going to deny I have taken a few drugs before. I've taken drugs before, but I'm not on drugs, and I experienced those things well before taking any drugs. Before I'd had any kind of, except I was forcibly put on drugs that I do think hurt me by doctors for 11 years. So that absolutely did fuck up my development and other things, but that wasn't a choice. That wasn't me taking drugs. That was doctors forcibly medicated for something I don't have that they thought I had because it was on my record since I was a small child, and that wasn't a choice. But that's aside from the point. I am not currently on drugs. Sometimes, if offered drugs, sure, I'll try it, but I'm not addicted to any drugs. The experiences I have innately. The experiences I have of spirits coming to me and visiting me, and angels talking to me, and demons talking to me, and me myself being a sort of spirit, as I see myself as a sort of daemon, an angel in a human body. But all of our alters and our headmates in our personal DID system, because every single system is unique and different, but for us, we do see ourselves as spirits. In our case, we do see ourselves as magnificent, magical beings, and we also see ourselves as wizards, each with our own unique powers. And I am the king of the Court of Consciousness system, and the Court of Consciousness is the name for our system. And we are the Court of Consciousness. We are physically, not physically, because we're not exactly physical unless we're able to speak right now through the body, how I'm doing, and then we become physical. But, but people get upset because they don't understand us. And they think we're lying, or we're making it up, or it's too much. We have always been, even when we were hiding as much as we possibly could hide, we were too much, and what we say is too much for people to comprehend or grasp. And we can't really easily show it to them outside of our art and other things. And then we can show it more visually, but it's a mental experience. It is a psychological experience of our being and our own consciousness. And everyone's experience of that is going to be different, and for us, we see ourselves as a collective of spirits and different things, but none of that is from drugs. That's from viewing our own experience of our consciousness as an autistic DID system in a different way, in a way that is right for us. And so one of the things I've noticed, though, is the people who have deeply profound spiritual experiences from drugs tends to be talked about as this is some great, amazing new connection that they're able to obtain through that. Whereas me, as someone who is not on any drugs, sure, I'll take some if offered, but it's not about that, right? It's that I am not high right now. This is my natural state of being. My natural state of being involves plurality of consciousness, and I am also autistic, which makes me very, very sensitive to the elements, but also I'm a spiritual person who has practiced my craft for years, who has practiced various skills for years and attuned my senses without drugs until very, very far in, when I did try a little bit when I was part of a cult, And that, anyway, but I'm not going into that right now. Like right now, I'm not high and I have spiritual senses people attribute to the usage of drugs. And when people attribute those senses to the usage of drugs, it tends to be more socially acceptable, is what I have noticed. Because if an abled person takes drugs to make themselves have the abilities that me as a disabled person has through the usage of training my spiritual senses already, then that they tend to be seen as palatable or acceptable. Whereas if me as a disabled person has those same experiences without the usage of any drugs, we are seen as less than and put beneath others. And that hurts, because why is it more acceptable through the usage of drugs, but not through, say, the usage of meditation or learning to control your focus and your energies and your bodies within you? And why are we as a disabled entity seen as less than someone on drugs if our more drug-like symptoms are not coming from any drugs, but are just coming from our brain, and our brain being different, and our brain being an autistic brain and a fragmented brain of a DID system where my consciousness is not one consciousness, and I do not personally believe that in our case it could ever be one consciousness. We are multiple different minds, multiple separated minds, one body. And that's hard for people to understand and grasp. That's why personally I'm not as opposed to the lens of possession for my system specifically. I would never ever call another DID system possessed unless they had explicitly told me they were okay with that language, and if I wasn't using that language in a derogatory sense, because that's an important difference as well. But in our case, it does feel very comparable. And before we knew we had DID, we did just say we were a possessed wizard, because that's the lens we had at that time. And now we have the lens of DID, and we understand from the medical psychological perspective that both are true for us, and that these people are a part of my brain and my mind and my consciousness, and that's okay. And the reason that distinction was important is I can't actually get rid of or banish or whatever, like cast away a part of my brain. I have to learn to make peace with it, and I have to learn to live with it. Which, if you have a part of yourself that you think is an external entity that is saying horrific, awful shit to you, learning to live with that is really, really hard. But first understanding you're not going to get rid of them is then the first step to realizing, okay, well then where do we go from here? Because you're stuck with me. And that's why the psychological perspective is really, really important, actually, because it helps you approach things from a different perspective, and having as many different lenses as you can is very useful, I found, to coping with our unique existence. And so I guess I wanted to talk about that because I just woke up and it was one of the things on our mind.